لأنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا مهزرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب فجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض من أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أن حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم بمثله ما يركبون وإن نشاء نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم انفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أن نطعم من لا يشاء الله وأطعما إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا مهزرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم أن لا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا الصراط المستقيم ولقد ضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نؤمر ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه شعرا وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند مهزرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد الفاتحة
محمد وآل محمد صلوات لاش پہ زینب رو کے پکاری، بھیا ہمارا کوئی نہیں، خیمے جلے اور سجاد قیدی، کفنی تمہارا کوئی نہیں، دیکھو اے بھائی میں زہرا کی جائی، لاشے پہ آئی ہوں بے پردہ ہو کر، مارا گیا ہے عباس غازی، قاسم دلارا کوئی نہیں، بے کس یتیموں کا قافلہ بائی، تو ہی بتا دے کہاں لے کے جاؤں، لاشیں سنبھالو یا کنبے کو دیکھوں، غم کا کنارہ کوئی نہیں، ویراں ہے خیمے خالی ہے جھولا، تشنا سکینہ کے قصے کو دیکھو، گر کر ہوئی چور بے آس بیٹی، اب تو سہارا کوئی نہیں، کریل جواں کی میت ہے آئی، کہتی ہے لیلا اے میرے اکبر، کس کی نظر تم کو کھا گئی ہے، میرا سہارا کوئی نہیں، بولی یوں رو کے زہرا کی جائی، کرب و بلا میں گھر لٹ گیا ہے، مارا گیا ہے اب میرا بھائی، وارث ہمارا کوئی نہیں، بولیے زینب اونو محمد، اٹھو اے پیارو آئی ہے مادر، باتیں تو کر لو بولو اے پیارو، غم کا کنارہ کوئی نہیں، لاشے پہ زینب رو کے پکاری، بھیا ہمارا کوئی نہیں۔ سورۃ البارکۃ الفاتحہ۔
Sheikh Bilal, respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight's Yasin has been sponsored for the Ithalat Wab of the Marhumeens that are displayed on the screen. Let us recite Surah Fatiha for all marhumin. Bismillah. Tomorrow, Thursday, we will have our Shab-e Jummah program starting at 8 p.m. as well as the 1-year majlis for Marhuma Amina Bai Ghulam Raza Jivraj and the 2-year majlis for Marhum Ghulam Raza Jivraj. On Friday, we'll have Salatul Jummah starting at 11:45 a.m., starting with Du'a Nudba with Dr. Dungarsi, followed by on Saturday, we will have Saturday 5:12 p.m. the Sufro of Imam Jafar Sadiq and Imam Ali celebration. On Sunday, we'll have madrasa from 10:45 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Lastly, let us recite the ayah of Amma Yujib 5 times for all those who are sick here and around the world. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul mustarra iza da'u wa yakshifu su. 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 Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allah Jal farjum. Let's recite aloud salawat for Sheikh Bilal. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
عرش سے بھی اونچا عالم میں مکان جن کا عالم میں مکان جن کا کوفے میں انہی پر زندہ کام ہے کیوں ہے بتلا یہ ستم تیرا میدان میں غربت کے زینب کے یہ تھے نالے زینب کے یہ تھے نالے جب بھائی چلا مرنے پھر زندہ بہن کیوں ہے بتلا ستم تیرا برپا ہے عزا کس کی کون آیا ہے پردیسی کون آیا ہے پردیسی اس درجہ یہ تاریکی اے قوم وطن کیوں ہے بتلا یہ ستم تیرا اے قوم نہیں زینب کیا دختار پیغمبر کیا دختار پیغمبر عالم کی خزادی کے بازو میں رسن کیوں ہے بتلا یہ ستم تیرا محمد والی محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم
محمد والے محمد صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد والے محمد
Ya Allah, bismillah.
رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وقالت لأخته قصيه فبصرت به عن جنب وهم لا يشعرون. آمنا بالله، صدق الله العلي العظيم. صل على محمد. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat for ta'jeel faraj sahib al-asri wa zaman. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بذكرنا المسائب على Muhammad. May Allah increase in our rewards for remembering the difficulties of Ali Muhammad. Alhamdulillah, it's not more than 2 days ago that we sat here in celebration, and that 2 days later we come and we sit here together in commemoration. and the change that comes in a period of 2 days is not something that is a typical condition that a person has. However, it's a reflection of the love that a people have for the Ahlul Bayt, that it feels almost as if there is no happiness of our own and there is no sorrow of our own, but rather it is the happiness and the sorrow of Ahlul Bayt that moves us. And alhamdulillah for that tawfiq that Allah has attached us to the examples of the Ahlul Bayt and given us the permission to be attached to their example and follow the examples of personalities like Sayyida Zaynab salamullahi alayha. There are two main points that I'd like to discuss tonight to keep the majlis brief in discussion, both revolving around this personality, one in context of contemporary time and one in trying to have ma'rifah of who this personality is. In our current society, it has been deemed appropriate that gender not be a discriminating factor in finding a role model. What I mean to say is that culture and society is teaching us that whether it's the role of a man or a woman, the goal is one. And Islam has not presented us with this. Rather, Islam has distinctly provided that the role of men and women are different, their role models are different, their goals in life are different. The consequence of this shift in ideology in current society of what they call empowering women has led to the destruction of not just the family layout, the family model, but even has destroyed, for example, the akhirah of women. Why? By removing the structure of the family and removing a woman from the core of a family and the family not being a priority, it removed the ability of, for example, marriage, of having children, of having this infrastructure that in youth seems no different, but as the aging process continues, we realize the need of that family, the need of that structure, and khususan in the process of idealizing and understanding the priority of our akhirah, that it leaves these women who don't believe in the value of family because it seems to reduce their role in competing with men, to one without a family, without an infrastructure such that when that woman dies, she dies alone. There's no mahram, there's no family, there's no children, there's no commemoration. The other aspect of it is the reality of what's attainable and what's achievable. That it was never intended to be that men and women are identical. That was never the goal. Therefore, the role and the conclusion was never meant to be that it should be the same result that both are achieving for. The system was designed to be complementary, that one completes the other, not one replicates the other and creates the exact same conclusion in the other. The consequence of this identical process as opposed to a complementary process has led to the conclusion that why do I need to be married? Why do I need a husband? I can do that myself. And many men asking the same question, why do I need someone who can do the same thing as I can when I am individually complete and on my own? This entire process and this structure has changed how, for example, women look at themselves, and they look at themselves in a masculine light, and they see themselves to have the same responsibilities and obligations as men, and same goals to be achieved as men. And the goals of men have been at points in time, and including in contemporary environment, have been skewed to where instead of looking at responsibility, looking at akhirah, looking at generations and genealogy, what's considered as wealth, status, and society. And this is a mistake on the behalf of men and the role that they establish. And that women mirroring that same concept has again let the foundation of society crumble. The point of mentioning it in such a situation is to take a look and understand that it has to be an education in ourselves that stands out from the culture that we live in, that prioritizes the unique roles of both men and unique roles of women and educates them on what is the goal to achieve. Many of us migrated here for the economic potential. That's very true. For the educational potential, very good. But what happened is, as a consequence of that education and income, the qibla shifted. And we forgot akhirah. We forgot everything. And religion became a tradition and a culture, as opposed to being the guiding light by which we map our lives. And we need to reinstitute that process, both sides. For a man, that the conversation, for young men, to have that conversation, talking about who do you want to marry, what kind of life do you want to live, talking about the aspect of what kind of father do you intend to be, what do you want to leave for your akhirah, what do you intend to invest for Allah, what do you intend to do in the name of Allah on a daily basis, what is going to change in your life. And on the same side and same token for women as well. And instead of championing, listen, let them study whatever they want. Let them become whatever they want, but it doesn't take over the priority of the family. And explaining the value of the family, that family is your key to your akhirah. Allah has in His mercy, when He differentiated these roles between men and women, made it easier for the women than the men. Some of you may like to hear that, some of you may not, but it's the truth. For a man, you have to answer for many relationships on the Day of Judgment. You have to answer for how did you deal with your parents, how did you deal with the children you were supposed to raise, how did you deal with your spouse in your house, did you take care of her, provide for her resources, did you take care of society, were you a part of the community? All of these will be questions that will be your obligation to answer. For women, there's one question, one relationship that they have to answer for. And that one relationship is the relationship between a woman and her husband. And if she succeeds in that one question, then everything else is taken care of. It may seem unfair, but it's not an easy relationship, as many of you will vouch for. To the extent where our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam would explain and say that a woman dealing with her husband is her jihad. Literally, is her jihad. That one relationship to manage is very difficult, it's very challenging, it's very hard, but its reward is extreme. And that's it. The priority of how do I balance all of these other relationships is something you and I have to deal with. Allah simplified the matter to one relationship. Which is why all of our daughters should prefer this as a concept, that marriage is important. It's so important that you take a look and you see, whether you look at the Asira of Sayyida Khadija, of Sayyida Zahra, of Sayyida Zaynab, marriage was a priority. And where we saw that, for example, in the women of Ahlul Bayt, marriage didn't exist, it was not because they didn't want to get married, it was because there was no one appropriate to marry. And where no one appropriate to marry existed, marriage was not an option then. When we look, for example, at the daughters of Imam al-Kadhim, Imam al-Kadhim's daughters, he wanted them to get married. He gave the responsibility to his son Imam Rada that you are the wali over all of them and provide for all of them, unless if they can get married, then get them married, but it has to be by your approval. So meaning the intention was always there that even they would be married, but the quality of candidate wasn't present because of the impacts of the Banu Abbas, creating an environment where it was not possible to with dignity have the daughters of Imam al-Kadhim married. But that concept of marriage and preferring of family life is something that we've lost. And we've idealized the role of men as being the role model for women to achieve and strive for, and men to achieve and strive for. But that's not what Allah intended. Allah has given us different role models for different genders. To the extent where even the verse that we began our discussion with, Surah Al-Qasas, verse number 11, refers to and discusses the tarikh of Nabi Musa, in the aspect of how, after he is born, that what was the role of his mother and what was the role of his sister. Allah specifies the role of the sister of Nabi Musa and identifies her not as the daughter of her mother, but as the sister of Musa, to indicate her role, her uniqueness, her status and her responsibility. وَقَالَتْ لِأُخْتِهِ. This is the mother of Musa speaking to the sister of Musa, where she says, and she said to the sister of Musa, قَصِّهِ فَبَصُرَتْ بِهِ عَنْ جَنْبٍ وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. That this is where, when after the mother of Musa puts Nabi Musa into the cradle and places him into the water, she says to the sister of Musa, and Allah narrates it as the sister of Musa, to show the connection and relationship of both brotherhood and sisterhood, as well as the role and important responsibility that this sister held in the life and story of Nabi Musa, and the responsibility she held for completing this goal, and that her efforts in the service of Islam are immortalized in the Quran, and her mention continues. And it's explained that she followed the cradle of Musa in the water until they could not see, and she hid from them so that they did not know that she was following him. And then the verse 12 continues about talking about how when Musa was found by the family of Fir'aun, and that they tried to keep Musa, that they couldn't find anyone that could nurse him until this sister of Musa comes forward. And her words are explained in the Quran as saying that, shall I introduce to you a family that will take care of this child, who will nurse this child, and who will be an aid to you in the raising of this child. This description and discussion talks about, for example, one of the examples of the role of women that they played in the history of preserving the religion of Islam, serving the cause of Islam in their own identity and purpose, and the championing of that ideology. If you want to look at other examples, look at the example of Hajira. Bibi Hajira is someone who, in her effort of supporting the concept of Nubuwwat and preserving Nubuwwat and following the examples of Nubuwwat, her actions are immortalized in the actions of Hajj. This sa'i of running back and forth, that's part of Hajj that you can't get away from, that you can't complete anything without, is what? Her effort in preserving the life of Nabi Ismail. Her effort in serving the Nabi of Allah on this earth. And how it became a part of the religion. Look at the example of Maryam and the preservation of Isa and the service of the family of the Ahlul Bayt of Imran, and how it was that she had this responsibility that is again immortalized. Their roles were not the example of walking into society and presenting the religion as the Anbiya did. But we can't say that their role was any less important in making sure that the religion of Allah preserved in this earth. That difference in that role is something that both we need to be conscious of and acknowledge and know, that the priority and qibla of our achievement, in spite of education, wealth and status, is to ensure that our service is for the sake of Allah, and that this family structure that Allah has given us is something that's preserved in our generations, so as to make sure that the path to Allah is clear and easy, and that there is no better path. Had there been a better path, we would have seen no one other than the daughter of Rasulullah, Sayyida Fatima Zahra, salamullahi alayha. Fulfill that path herself. And the consequence of how I'm confident to tell you that this doesn't mean keep your children away from education. No, promote education. Make sure they're educated. Why? Because in the seerah of Sayyida Zaynab is the most famous of statements, Anti alima, ghayr muallima. Anti fahima, ghayr mufahama. That statement of Imam Zainul Abidin demonstrates and discusses the importance of that education that was present in Sayyida Zaynab. That the service of Islam that she provided was not possible without the education that she had. I mentioned as well too, when the argument was made that I hear in her words the speech of Ali ibn Abi Talib, was not the fact that her voice or the carriage of her words sounded like Amir al-Mu'mineen. It was because the distinction of logic and intellect in her words, the strength of her arguments and structure of her thought reflected the speech of Ali ibn Abi Talib. That does not happen without an education. That does not happen without promotion to the best of stations of knowledge. What has happened in many places is what? We've argued that, because, for example, we don't want you to, for example, take the responsibility of being a full-time professional, don't get an education. No, it's not the goal. That's confusing and breaking the message. That's devaluing the position of Islam. No, it's that all of this education is in the service of Islam, and the easiest way for the service of Islam to ensure that your akhirah is protected, your generations are protected, your generations live on Islam, is the preference of that message of Islam over the desire of the self to be known. These careers, these professionalisms, this championing of these items is what? Is the exposure of the nafs. Let me be in a place where I get to show off who I am and what I am. Let me display my talents to show the world what I can accomplish. The same way that now this culture is devolving even further, that it's no longer about the career and profession that you can attain, it's about the beauty that you can demonstrate and what you can do with your beauty to make the people follow you. All of this is the nafs, and that's not the goal. That's why one of the important conversations in understanding in the seerah of Sayyida Zaynab is the preference and the understanding that each of these roles will be different. Both serve the religion of Islam, both hold a priority and importance. And which is why, when you look and you see the example of Sayyida Zaynab, in her example, you see fadilat even over the Anbiya in the affairs of what she accomplished with her life and what she served for the sake of Islam. For the second of our points, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad. The attribute in the life of Sayyida Zaynab is something that is both attached to the Ahlul Bayt and as well as reflects the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt and shows the status that she attains in comparison to even the Anbiya. Her status is something to be admired. One of the discussions and debates that comes in the concept of, for example, that she does not have Ismatil Kubra. Ismatil Kubra refers to that sinlessness that is mandatory for the religion to persist. What does that mean? To be sinless is the goal of every human being. Every single one of us has the goal to achieve the concept of being sinless. And you begin with a minute of not committing a sin, to 2 minutes, to 5 minutes, to an hour, to 5 hours, to 12 hours, to 24 hours, to a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, until you get to a lifetime. Every human being has this goal. But the difference in the sinlessness between, for example, what you and I achieve and what's called Ismat Kubra that the Ma'sumin possess, is that Ismat Kubra is necessarily one for the religion of Islam, that person has to be sinless. Otherwise, they can't be the example for me to follow in my religion. Meaning that they can't make a mistake, because if they made one mistake, that means anything else that they did, how do I know they didn't do it accidentally? How do I know that they did it intentionally? How do I know that this is what Allah wanted me to do? The other aspect of Ismat Kubra is that it's that Ismat that is not grounded in miraculous nature, but is grounded in knowledge. That the knowledge of the Imam has to be perfect for every instance so that he can enact and not make a mistake or commit a sin in any instance. When we talk about anyone other than the Ahlul Bayt, when we want to achieve sinlessness, when the examples like Sayyida Zaynab attain sinlessness, it's not through precaution that we won't do anything and just sit in one room and don't do anything at all. It's through the perfection of knowledge that they establish the concept of sinlessness in their seerah. That the more that they learn, the more less likely they are to commit a sin. And these are people who, because of their knowledge and their character, did not sin. This status that she possesses and this position that she possesses doesn't make her from the 14 Masumin, but there's a reason for that, because of the consequence of what that means. As we mentioned, one of the important attributes for a woman is that she can get married, and that is the easiest path to reach to Allah. But if, for example, we were to say one of the ma'sumin was from the women and she was able to get married, it would have to be to another ma'sum. Otherwise, that would be opposite of what Allah has commanded of looking at kuf. That's someone who is the equivalent. And if there is only one lineage that has ismat in it, then obviously it has to either marry into someone else or in some other direction. Which is why the Aimma alayhimus salam are given that position and they have that authority, as well as the fact that the consequence of that ismat is to make your seerah accessible to humanity. That people have to be able to follow your example. They have to be able to see and interact and learn from your example. And in the case of a woman who hijab is a priority, prevents that from being able to happen. So the necessity of Ismat Kubra is to be the example for society to follow. And in the case of, for example, the daughters of the Holy Prophet after Sayyida Fatima, that this example was limited to that Isma, which is not the greater Isma, but the lesser Isma. But it doesn't reduce their ability to be the example, which is why, looking at her life, you can see how her patience and her attributes were greater than even the patience that the Anbiya had embodied. Why? Look and see at the example of Adam. Nabi Allah Adam wept at being cast out from the Jannah. And they describe that he's one of the bakkaun, one of the criers, who cried so much that he made tracks on his cheeks from the tears that he wept. Yet he was cast out from one Jannah, and the example of Sayyida Zaynab is that one who was forced to leave the Jannah of the city of Medina in the company of Rasulullah, and forced to go on this journey because of the oppression that people placed upon the Ahlul Bayt. And the second Jannah that she was cast away from was the example and the company of Imam Hussain. And that leaving the example of Imam Hussain was something that was so difficult that it was as if it was a garden of peace that she was cast out of. Adam alayhi salam lost his one son Habil, and he wept over that losing of Habil. Sayyida Zaynab is the one who lost 18 members of her family. In one of the Maqtal of Mukarram, there's a narration that says the night after Ashura, when Sayyida Zaynab goes looking for the daughter of Imam Hussain, she walks into the Maqtal in the middle of this night and she stumbles across bodies, and one of the bodies she stumbles across is her own son Aun. But you see that her patience continues through this level. You see the example of Nuh. That Nuh, who was abused by his community, who was treated with harshness, who was treated with abuse and difficulty, who served this community and guided them, and yet in spite of that they would throw stones at him and abuse him. Sayyida Zaynab is that one whose family was killed in this process by that same community that she never cursed against, yet Nuh was the one who called Allah's punishment down on those people. Sayyida Zaynab is that one who describes and is told and says that I will not be the one to call against my nation. I will not be the one to complain against my nation. Yet Nuh did this action. When you look at the example of Ibrahim, when he was cast into the fire of Nimrud, what did Allah say for him? Ya naru kuni bardan wa salama. O fire, be cold for Ibrahim. Don't be difficult upon Ibrahim. Yet when Sayyida Zaynab is in that tent and the call comes, أَحْرَقُ بُيُوتَ الظَّالِمِينَ, burn the houses of the oppressors, that fire did not become cool for Sayyida Zaynab. She bore that difficulty with patience. Ibrahim stood over his son with a knife, and when he wanted to cut, the knife would not cut. He wanted to sacrifice, the sacrifice would not be taken from him, and the difficulty was alleviated from him. Yet look and see that how did Ibrahim approach that sacrifice? He stood with his eyes covered, with his shirt removed that the blood would not lay on his skin. Yet Zaynab is that one who, when we go to Karbala, we see the maqam of Tillai Zaynabiyya, from where she watches the difficulty of her brother, who is in such a condition that they describe and say that when she stood there, she called out, A'anta akhi Hussain. I cannot recognize my own brother who I've lived my entirety of my life with in this condition. Yet she witnesses this. There's a narration that describes and says, when we discuss the blood of Ismail could not be handled by Ibrahim. Zaynab is that one. That in some narrations they have written in poetic sense that we saw a woman the night after Ashura whose rida was red. And we imagine, why would her rida be red? Why? Because when the body of Akbar was brought in front of her, she threw herself on that bleeding chest. And yet it was Ibrahim, who is the Prophet of Allah, who was the one who had the difficulty of trying to sacrifice Ismail. If you understand the concept of Musa, when he had to go in front of Fir'aun, he made the statement, Oh Allah, send my brother with me, for me to stand in front of this enemy whose family I have killed, one person of his community I killed. I am worried that they should be harsh to me. Send me with my brother. Sayyida Zaynab, when she returns to Medina, she calls out and she says, Oh grandfather, I wept not once in front of them, though they abused the head of my brother in front of me. Oh Rasulullah, I spoke in front of them with confidence. I did not hesitate once in my speech, yet my children were tied around me. They had stolen my rida, but my control was complete. Where is that Musa and where is this Zaynab? Isa alayhi salam is that one who, when the sacrifice was to be taken from him, Allah lifted him to the heavens. But Zaynab is that one who witnessed the sacrifice of each of her family members and each of her children and community. And not just that, they describe and say that Aba Abdullah honored every shaheed on the day of Ashura. But this honor was completed in twofold. One, that he himself would bring the body back. And before the mother, the sister, the wife would reach upon that shaheed, Zaynab would be sitting upon him, offering comfort and consolation to each mother and sister and daughter, to say, my mother will reward you, my grandfather Rasulullah is waiting to reward you. Ismail was lifted from this, Isa was lifted from this difficulty. Zaynab is the one who bore it patiently through every single one of these stages. The fadail of that lady, we can't begin to understand that where the Anbiya, Allah would go easy upon them. This is the shahadat of that lady upon whom every difficulty came down in full account, that she is Sharikat al-Hussain, not just in the path that the mission is incomplete without her, but the same way that Hussain ibn Ali went through each of these sacrifices and difficulties, so did Zaynab stand by his side in her role and her unique capacity that reduced not an iota of her status in the eyes of Allah, or even in the example of the Anbiya who were sent to teach us the religion of Allah. Which is why there is no way to describe this lady
There is no way to explain who this lady was in its entirety. And it takes nothing away from her status, that she was a lady and that she presented her sacrifice for the sake of Islam in a manner different than the way Abu Abdullah did. There's no way that you can mention Abu Abdullah today without the mention of this lady. Her fadilat is that she has given so much that even in the description of her shahadat, the words fall short, that we don't know how to explain it. That there are some who say that her death 1 year after the death of Imam Hussain is from the grief of this loss. And others who describe and say that no, certainly it is an assassination that was performed. How is it that all of the ladies of Karbala lived not more than 2 years after the event of Karbala, that one after another they passed from this world, except that they were intended to be silenced? This is why today when we look to the grave of the Sayyida Zaynab, there is no one authentic location. Some will narrate and say, Baqi', she is there where her brother is. She is there where her family is. Others say no, that she is in Misr, in Egypt, in Cairo. There is her maqam and her place. And others still who point to the bazaar of Sham and say it was that location where she was forced to be. The description of why these differences come elaborates on the fact that the message and the prowess and the power of this lady was such that she was the remainder of Ahl al-Kisa, that she was the guiding light that ensured the passage of Imamat from Imam Hussain to Imam Zaynul Abidin, that the nation knew where the Imam was. They looked to her, who was raised in the house of Ahl al-Kisa, and where she pointed them, they followed, and where she wept, they wept. That as the nation of Muslimin looked to her to cry, the Banu Umayyah had to separate her from this location. They had to bring her out of this place to force it to end the discussion around what happened in Karbala. And so they say that whether it was in Sham, where it is most likely, that after 1 year, there are two poetic descriptions. One that says it was the return to Sham, and as she entered Sham, she began to weep, because now there was no one to whip her or to whip Sakina when she would cry. That when she saw a tree upon which the head of her brother was hung, all of that difficulty and misery came back to her, and she sat under this tree, looking up and saying, oh, how did I live through the experience that my beloved brother's head was hung here and abused, and I have come back here again, that life left her. And then others argue and say that no, it was this message that she presented in Sham that again threatened to topple the Khalifa, that they went and they poisoned her and they ended her life in this place far from her brother Hussein, but close to her niece Sakina, who had been left alone. If you wanted to understand who she is, listen to the way that they describe and say, if she was to be eulogized, listen to her own words as she would say her own eulogy. أنا الذي شفت نارين. I am the one who in my life witnessed two fires. نار بالباب ونار بالخيم. The fire at the door of my mother's house and the fire in the tents. أنا الذي شفت صدرين. The head, I am the one who witnessed the two heads. The head of my father split in the mihrab, and the head of my Hussein raised on a spear. أنا الذي شفت تشتين. I am the one who witnessed the two trays, one with kabad al-Hasan, the liver of Hassan as it would come out in blood. I sat and I witnessed it. And the tray in which the head of my Hussein was returned to Sakina. وأنا الذي شفت صدرين. I am the one who witnessed the two chests. The chest of my mother when they killed my brother, and the chest of my Hussein upon which they ran horse after horse. That's chest of my brother that my nephew Zaynul Abidin collected piece by piece and buried my Hussein. One poet goes so far, it was Imam Zaynul Abidin who completed this burial, did the ghusl, did the kafan, took Sayyida Zaynab out to the place of her burial, buried his aunt with his own 2 hands. The poet writes and describes, there was silence through this entire process, but we swear we heard cries coming from the grave upon her burial. Oh Hussain, forgive me. I was loyal to you, but Islam insisted that I be married, and Islam did not give you that right. You were not married when I was married. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره. Ya Allah, بحق Sayyida Zaynab, وبحق هذا الشهر وبحق هذا القرآن. Oh Allah, forgive our sins, cover our flaws. Ya Allah, give us the tawfiq of the ziyarat of the grave of Sayyida Zaynab. Ya Allah, give us the opportunity to visit the graves of Ahlul Bayt. Give our daughters the tawfiq to follow the seerah of Sayyida Zaynab. Give our children the tawfiq to be the supporters of Imam al-Zaman. Ya Allah, give us the shafa of Abu Abdullah in the hereafter and ziyarat of Imam Hussain in this world. Maatam Hussain.
فاطمہ فردوس سے نکلی ہے سر پیٹتی کہتی ہوئی اہل ازاں عادات ازاں ہے شمبرو شبیر بھی عالم ارواح میں پیٹتے ہیں کر مکا آتا جنازہ ہے یہ ملوائے عام میں ہے جو پھری در بدر اس زینب مغموم کا آتا جنازہ ہے یہ کہتے ہیں زین العبا کیا کروں میں غم زدہ ساتھ پھوپھی کا چھوٹا آتا جنازہ ہے جناب زینب نیند سے بیدار ہوئی اور یہ دعا کرنے لگی، خداوندا زینب طرف شام نب یہاں سے رواں ہو، زینب طرف شام نب یہاں سے رواں ہو، کل صبح ملاقات حسین ابن علی ہو، عزیز و فاتحہ پڑھنے چلو زینب کی تربت پر، لو عابد بھی ہے پڑھتے فاتحہ زینب کی تربت پر، عزیز و فاتحہ پڑھنے چلو زینب پر چلے ہیں انبیاء سارے، ملک کی فوج پر فوجیں صدا تنزیل کی ہے آ رہی زینب کی تربت پر، عزیز و فاتحہ پڑھنے چلو زینب پر، چلے ہیں شام کو احمد علی و فاطمہ زہرا، وہ مل کر پڑھتے ہیں سب فاتحہ زینب کی تربت پر، عزیز و چلو زینب کی تربت پر، اڑا کر خاک سر پر عابد مزتر معصوم چھڑکتے پانی ہے وہ ثانی زہرا کی تربت پر، عزیز و فاتحہ پڑھنے چلو زینب پر، عزیز و فاطمہ زہرا کی آتی ہے صدا ہر دم، وہاں سو تلاوت کرنے کی زینب کی تربت پر، عزیز و فاتحہ پڑھنے چلو زینب پر، ہم سب کی یہ تمنا ہے، بلا لو شام ہمیں زہرا، ہم سب کی یہ تمنا ہے، بلا لو شام ہمیں زہرا، پڑھے ہم بھی تو آ کر فاتحہ तेहा ज़ैनब की तुरबत पर अज़ीज़ो फातिहा पढ़ने चलो ज़ैनब की तुरबत पर। मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ज़ियारत इमाम।
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I'll start with the ziyarat of Sayyida Zaynab from the Sahifa app for those who'd like to follow along. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alayki ya binta Rasulillah. Assalamu alayki ya binta Nabiyillah. Assalamu alayki ya binta Muhammadin al-Mustafa. السلام عليك يا بنت ولي الله. السلام عليك يا بنت علي المرتضى سيد الأوصياء والصديقين. السلام عليك يا بنت فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا أخت الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة. السلام عليك أيتها السيدة الزكية. السلام عليك أيتها الداعية الخفية. السلام عليك أيتها التقية النقية. السلام عليك أيتها الراضية المرضية. السلام عليك أيتها العالمة الغير المعلمة. السلام عليك أيتها الفهيمة الغير المفهمة. السلام عليك أيتها المظلومة. السلام عليك أيتها المهمومة. السلام عليك أيتها المغمومة. السلام عليك أيتها الصديقة. السلام عليك أيتها المكروبة. السلام عليك أيتها المأسورة. السلام عليك أيتها صاحبة المصيبة العظمى. السلام عليك يا زينب الكبرى ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا رسول الله يا محمد بن عبد الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين يا علي بن أبي طالب. السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى أم المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله يا حسين بن علي الشهيد بكربلاء. السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين زين العابدين. السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي الباقر. السلام عليك يا جعفر بن محمد الصادق. السلام عليك يا موسى بن جعفر الكاظم. السلام عليك يا علي بن موسى الرضا. السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي الجواد. السلام عليك يا علي بن محمد الهادي. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي العسكري. السلام عليك يا حجة الله يا ابن الحسن يا صاحب الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.